And for me, cycling has been that thing that for many, many years was almost a glue that we had this common bond, and we went on, our holidays were based around cycling, our weekends were based around cycling, we cycled to school, and it was just a thing. And especially as a mother with boys, I can't go and play rugby with them, I can't go and, do all these other things. I've tried, but yeah. Whereas the cycling, I was really, really keen that I would cycle. I wasn't going to be a mum who stayed at home while Dad and the boys went off cycling. We did everything together, and I developed all my mountain biking skills and all this sort of stuff as I was, developing with them. And it's just given us so many memories now to look back on. That the bike is just part of the story. It's all the other things that we did, all the places we went, all the experiences, and you can't take that away, I think. And I think if you can find that glue, for us it was biking, for somebody else it might be something else completely, but if you've got that common interest, it helps you through some of those difficult times.
Welcome to another episode of Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopes. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. I'll leave a link to my profile on the show notes. And today we are diving into a topic that resonates with every parent, every community builder, and every cycling enthusiast. And the topic is, how do we inspire the next generation to fall in love with cycling? Now, you might be asking yourself, what's in it for me? Well, whether you are a parent wondering how to introduce your little one to the joy of riding, a cycling professional looking to understand the future market, or simply someone passionate about bikes and how they can transform communities, today's conversation will speak directly to you. So here's my invitation. Stay with us until the end. You will not only discover how a personal frustration became the UK's leading family cycling resource, but also what it takes to scale a passion project into an influential brand while balancing the messy realities of family life. Along the way, you will hear lessons you can apply to your own journey, whether personal, professional, or entrepreneurial. This episode isn't just about family bikes, e-bikes, cargo bikes. It's about big ideas. It's about what innovation in cycling really looks like, how cultural myths and social barriers can be dismantled, and what happens when community stories become the heartbeat of a business. And at the center of it all is Karen G, co-founder of Cycle Sprog. She leaves the questions many of us ask. Is it safe? Can I afford it? Am I doing this right? Her answers, shaped by over a decade of experience, are both practical and deeply human. So get ready for a wonderful conversation with Karen, because this isn't just a story about building a brand. It's a story about building confidence, connection, and a cycling culture for the future. So let's get into it. Welcome, Karen, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Pedro. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm excited about our conversation.
No, it's my pleasure. I wanted to have this conversation because many of the listeners will know I recently became a father, and now it kind of my attention turned into, how can I get my young son that just recently turned 1 into also share the love that I have for cycling as well. Not in a pressure way. I don't want to force on him the same enjoyment that I get out of cycling, but I want to introduce him to it. And so I started, as many parents do, researching and seeing what is out there. And obviously, Cycle Sprog came up as a resource. And, Cycle Sprog, over its 13 years of existence now, has become a niche authority in cycling, providing content and information for families, for young parents, to provide adequate resources to their children and introduce them to cycling. And I'm interested, there's a lot of information about your background and how you got started with Cycle Sprog, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to start by asking, to go deep into the inner workings of Cycle Sprog. What have you learned about building the community that kind of gives you back you have on Instagram, you give back, you share the success stories of people using products that make their children enjoy cycling. What's the lessons in these 13 years?
Yeah, I mean, I've been. I mean, you say it's now an authority, but I've been on such a journey myself, and I was where you were. My eldest is now 19, so I was sort of where you were a year ago. And Cycle Sprog didn't exist, and I wanted it. I wanted it to be there, and I ended up setting, and we might talk about that in a bit, how I actually set it up. But my learning is I'm still learning, and I'm on this journey, and I don't think you ever end as a parent. I think you're there with your 1-year-old, and I'm here now with my 19-year-old who's about to go off to university, and we're both probably going, what do we do next? What's the next thing? What do I need? Is it, and so I think all parents are on that journey. And I, when you start out on it, I don't think you realise you don't know what's ahead of you. You've got a 1-year-old, you don't necessarily know, what you're going to need when they're 5 or when they're 10 or 19. And what I'm trying to do with Cycle Sprog is almost map out that journey for parents, but I'm having to live it first and then sort of report back on it. And I think it gets more diverse as you get older. So when they're 1, you've got a lot of control. Over your baby. If you want to put them in a trailer, they're going to go in a trailer. They can't go, Dad, I don't want to do that. And then, but as they get older, they get more and more choice. They can decide what they want to do, what they don't want to do. They'll get things they like doing and things they don't like doing. And that's when I had to realise, okay, I can't be the font of all knowledge. Initially it was like, well, I can review a trailer, I can review a rear seat, I can review a front seat, and, job done. Now I have to have more advice coming into me because I've got 2 boys, they're of a certain age, they do a certain type of cycling or they don't do a certain type of cycling. I can't be the influencer as it was, as it, you have to draw on a community and learn from what other people are doing. If you want to maintain that relevance, I think. So that's
the kind of that story, I think it covers the credibility gap. A person that might just want to start, as you did, a blog, a website to share resources, and maybe without that story, without that kind of wanting to solve that pain point as a parent yourself, that credibility gap is is a big one to try to pass on to other people, other parents. Like, why would you, is this just a business venture? But organically, we have grown Cycle Sprog over time, and in the early days, you, as you just now said, you could have done the reviews yourself, but there were probably quite a few challenges to get to a point where you rely on other people to also help you in the building and maintaining the community and the resources updated and new coming along. And what is for you? What do you see kind of changed as the perception changed from outsiders looking and coming to you for advice in terms of what is out there available?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of different things going on. I think if you go back 19 years when I started, I did not know that you could cycle with little ones, with a 1-year-old or younger or a 2-year-old. So there was no information out there at all, and I didn't see anybody. I mean, I lived in Chester, which is a large city, reasonably large city, medium-sized city, and I didn't see anybody cycling with a baby. Wow. So I didn't know I could do it. So I didn't do it. So as soon as I was able to, when I'd become a mother, I got back on my bike to cycle for myself, and I left the baby at home with my husband, and it was a bit of me time to go out there and get some fresh air and some exercise. And then it wasn't until one of my friends who I'd met through sort of NCT, which is a post-birth charity that we have here in the UK. Yeah. I don't know if you've got international listeners who won't know what that is. It's kind of a support network for new mums. And I met a friend through that. And when my son was about a year old, so probably about the same age as yours, she appeared at my front door with a bike seat. And I was just like, oh my goodness, up until that point, we'd been riding together and leaving our babies at home. And that was the pivotal moment that just made me realize we could do this. So when I started blogging about it, because blogging was what you did back then, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have all these other social media platforms. I was really just doing it almost to document what I was learning so I could help somebody who was, 6 months down the line behind me. But there was very little out there in terms of products as well. So there was a choice for a couple of trailers, a couple of bike seats if you were lucky. Getting stuff into the UK was difficult. Cargo bikes. Well, I didn't even know cargo bikes existed. Probably seen a couple of pictures of them in the Netherlands, but that was it. So sort of that blog format kind of worked. And as I said before, I was able to test things, and it was all very simple. As it grew, I think two things happened. One, more and more products started to become available. So it became, instead of me just going, oh, well, you've got an option of a trailer or a bike seat, it was like, oh, suddenly you've got this option of all these trailers. So then the format had to change from a bit of a blog and what I was doing into more advice, buyer's guides, how to use these things, what they're compatible with. And so it sort of grew organically along with the industry. And I guess it was a bit of a symbiotic relationship because we were writing about it, people were buying them, and then there's more need for it. So exactly. I think the two have gone hand in hand. And I think you also asked about, how have I grown it and got other people involved? I think it was quite early on when I realised I had to get other people to review products because I just couldn't physically do it. I was working full time. I only had I had two kids, of a certain age. It's like, well, the moment they've grown out of something, the moment they start pedaling, I can't review a balance bike. It becomes this. They say never work with animals and children, and it is very, very difficult because these kids keep growing. So I very quickly had to recruit friends, family, to help with that side of things. And then it just got to a certain age as well where physically I couldn't do all the admin and all the, you must know from the podcast, there's so much you could do. You couldn't suddenly scale to doing 10 podcasts a week because there's only you would have to bring on other people and you'd have to think of new ways to do it. So I had to start thinking about how can I build the business. What started as a blog had suddenly become a business as well. I realized I was able to monetize it. And from a time perspective, it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, it's got to make some money to cover my time. If I'm going to start reducing my hours at work to work on this. So then that involved me having to, over a period of, 10 years or so, build up a team to support me.
I wanted just, sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to kind of, because there's a lot of information you just shared, and I wanted to kind of break it down and kind of go a bit deeper into certain areas. And one area is what you mentioned about, growing as a blog. And as you start growing, there's more products coming, there's more products appearing, and then kind of it starts it's kind of a upwards curve that you and the industry are going on. That's one bit, and then the other is the kind of the social barriers. How the culture of riding with children, and finally the business itself, the kind of the business perspective. I wanted. So these are the three things that I wanted to kind of break down a little bit more. And so let's go to the first one. The first one is quite interesting because you mentioned in starting with only a few products. And as you're growing, you start seeing more products, and you mentioned you need to bring more people to help you grow as well. What you started with Cycle Sprog. I wanted to ask, how have the industry itself has kind of started noticing, or not necessarily, probably noticing is the wrong word, but creating products that are going to be of relevance to young families, to young children, rather than focusing on the adults, for instance. Because that's, we see a lot in the space, or I see a lot in the space, you have specialists that cater for those needs, and then you have also big brands that notice those small brands doing their own things, and it's like, oh, hold on, hold on a minute, let me go and do a little bit of this as well. So I also have a product in that category, so I'm not seen as like, oh, I'm not paying attention. So what has been your experience of, brands
I think
adapting and growing as you go along?
Yeah. And I think that's very you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. There's the two extremes, and I think so. We've got a lot of very specialist brands out there, and they virtually all of them start because somebody becomes a parent, a bit like you, and then they suddenly realise that what they want isn't there. For the market, and I've been one of the first people to do that, and I think who was the absolute trailblazer was Isla Roundtree, who set up Isla Bikes. But before that, she'd actually been working at Halfords and trying to introduce some products via there. But she saw the need for her family nieces and nephews and stuff, that she couldn't give them a bike that was of the quality she wanted them to ride on. So she went away and developed Isla Bikes, which then set a standard for people. And I think at the time people were going, nobody's going to pay that for a bike. Why would anybody want a decent kids bike? And then she proved it. And then other people come along and go, oh, we could improve on that. We could improve on or we could make it cheaper, or we could change the distribution model, or we could change the range or the colour. And then everybody's trying to find a little bit of niche around that. And then similar things have happened in some of the other areas around clothing, around seats. Kids Ride Shotgun is a really good one. They're based in New Zealand, and they make a mountain bike seat, which you may or may not have come across. And they're very niche and very specialist. And then they build out from there. They see where are the gaps and how can they develop. So you've got that kind of really focused. And then some of those companies scale. So we've got Frog Bikes, we've got Woom Bikes, who are getting reasonably big sized. And they're always driven by usually a very passionate individual or a very passionate family or a couple of friends who get together and decide to build this. And we've always naturally worked very closely with those people because they come to us and they go, Karen, can we send you a bike to review? How can we work it? How can we get out there? And they tend to be the forerunners. They're the ones that kind of go and develop. And then what I noticed this pattern is that the big bike brands and the big companies are completely oblivious to this. They seem to be completely oblivious to the fact that their future market is going to be, your 1-year-old is at one point going to want to go and buy a top-end road bike, maybe, in 25, 30 years. They don't seem to see that. And then somebody has a baby within the company and they suddenly go, oh, we're missing a massive market here. And then they suddenly do something to their product range or bring something in or design something, usually based on what the rest of the industry has been doing. And then they have that vigor until that person leaves or, moves on to something else. And then, so that's how I saw it. I think, over the past 13 years, there's definitely been that pattern. Right. But then obviously once one of the big names brings out a kids bike range, it then, permeates through and they've got that brand awareness and then then they just become part of the product range and then, but it is quite interesting. We do see all that innovation coming from the small end of the
it's a very good point because when you look at other industries, big companies are established. They look at what brings the most revenue, and that then creates gaps in the market for companies, emerging companies, startups to see the specific pain points that that they themselves are experiencing or that they can recognize in the market, and they address them, and then they build a nice little niche around it. They start becoming profitable, and then eventually the big companies start looking and then or either develop their own product or buy them out. So it is very easy to see with the trajectory of these companies that create for instance Ride Shotgun, one of them, Isla Bikes, another one. Isla Bikes, I believe, is not functioning anymore as a production company, but
it's now just spare parts.
Exactly, that's correct. There's also bringing to the second point that you mentioned, which is cultural perspective. As a parent, your experience, you didn't see anyone that was carrying their babies, their children on bikes
Mhm.
in the city where you lived. And it speaks a lot to, I guess, to the fear of having your child on some kind of apparatus that perhaps you don't see it as safe enough to carry your young child.
Mm.
And I think there is some kind of social barriers and kind of cultural myths that still linger. And that's
Mhm.
because maybe the fault, our own fault, the cycling industry, of not addressing that, but also
Mm.
the fact that sometimes you if you don't see it, you can't be it. That there is that saying.
Mm.
So I wanted to kind of understand from your experience, what social barriers or cultural myths that
Mm.
still parents from face when trying to get
Yeah.
kids to enjoy cycling.
Yeah, I think from it has changed over the past sort of 19 years because it wasn't just my time. People didn't cycle with their kids like they do now. There just wasn't the products and all that sort of stuff. So I think now it is different. People do know you can do it. So I don't think we have that same. If I'd known, I would have done it because I was a very keen cyclist and I didn't like. I do drive, but I try not to drive. And I was walking and pushing everywhere, with a pushchair.
Yeah.
The moment I discovered it, I did it. So there isn't, I don't think, that much. I'm sure every town, city, village now has got somebody who cycles with their kids in some shape or form, and we've got easily accessible stuff now. So I think that kind of visibility isn't the problem, but I think there are the two. There's the social barriers, as you've said, and the cultural myths. And from a social barrier perspective, I think there's a lot of things. Stuff is expensive. And you're probably finding this, your baby is always growing, and that won't stop until they probably reach their 20s or whatever. So, there's definitely cost barriers to entry.
Of course.
Then there's things like storage. So, if you've got a garage, or you've got a nice secure garden, or you've got something like that, then you can much easier cycle with your kids than if you're living in a tower block, or you're living in the city centre, or you're just living somewhere that doesn't have storage. And kids' cycling gear is big, especially at the early ages. You've got trailers, you've got cargo bikes, you've got that sort of thing, or you've got multiple bikes when they get older. You've got, my kids now are, huge, and it takes up a lot of room to store the bikes. You've got things like security. If you've just gone out and bought all that stuff, you've got to be able to secure it. If you're in a high crime area, that's not going to work for you. We've got ability. Can you ride a bike? So if you can ride a bike confidently, you're much more likely to want to cycle with your kids than if you are really nervous or you can't cycle. So we've got that sort of barrier. And then the biggie is obviously, this is a social barrier. It's just the infrastructure. Is it safe? And can you get, so if you're riding for transport, is it safe to even leave your front gate, or however, and get to wherever you want to go? Or if you want to cycle for leisure, can you get to the places you want to go? So, like if I want to mountain bike with my kids, can I easily get to the place? Have I got that? So there's a lot, I think, and they're the main ones that spring to mind, sort of those social barriers. Yeah. And each one of those, it's a lot of work to break those down. And if you're hit by multiple of those, or if you just don't see people like you riding. So, if you wear hijab, for example, how do you cycle? Or if you're, different other things that can culturally and socially stop you riding a bike. Then you've talked about the cultural myths. Yeah. So I think some of these are really interesting ones. So, you can't cycle because of the weather, and I know, there's no such thing as the wrong weather, just the wrong clothing, but you can't cycle because it rains a lot. You can't cycle because it takes too long. That's a massive myth. Usually if you're doing the school run, it's far quicker to cycle than it is to drive if you're within a certain distance. Obviously for some people, it's not, but generally, walking and cycling can be so much quicker. I can't do it because it's too expensive. But then you're paying for your car, you're paying for the MOT, you're filling up with petrol, you're paying for parking. These are all myths, I think. It's too hilly, or it's too difficult, or so there's loads of these myths as well that which I think are becoming sort of starting to be sort of removed when people see other people doing it. And they see the solutions, and it's like, oh, well, if they can do it and they can do it, well, then why can't I? And we're starting to see that. Once you get a really small group of people doing it, then other people will start to do it, and you end up with a bit of community in certain areas where it's, encouraging each other to do it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from experience, as a keen cyclist, I still have, there's a lot of barriers that I have to face to get my child to go ride with me. And I don't, and then there is the fear, kind of, I don't feel comfortable taking my child on the road. So I want to take him out. I will walk to the park, and then ride. So those are physical, one in the infrastructure, and then the kind of the emotional and kind of emotional side of it. And I wanted to understand, this is a very personal experience. That is my experience. And is there, kind of through the work that you've been doing at Cycle Sprog, is there kind of an attention to kind of to addressing kind of the kind of the emotional side of the fear that people, keen cyclists perhaps, that they know where to find, they know through your website, they know, okay, for instance, I bought a ride shotgun to set up my kid on my bike, and kind of the beauty of that, this is not this is not the paid promotional thing. It's just a product that I now have a need for it. And the beauty of it is modular, so it grows with a kid for a certain time anyway.
Yeah. You got one of the new ones.
Yes,
you got a new one.
Yeah. So it will grow with him for a certain time, but it still doesn't take away, the fear that I have of taking him on a bike ride. And I'm a keen cyclist. I'm very confident riding around traffic, riding my bike, whatever bike it is. And I'm interested to see if this is something that people come to you with, with these concerns, and this is something that you have, you experience yourself even, and and how you address it in Cycle Sprog.
Yes, we've got we do work with, we do webinars, and we have got a masterclass around as well about cycling babies and toddlers. And it's interesting you should say this, because this is one of it's not the practicalities, it's the emotional side of things and the how do I do it. And we do try and tackle that, because the next thing you'll discover is as well, then when you want to sort of maybe cycle to school with them, or when they want to go off and ride by themselves, and it's each one of those is a massive emotional hurdle. For you as a parent, and it's only natural, but it's not just cycling, it's everything that you do with a child is you're constantly risk assessing, aren't you? Absolutely everything. Your life becomes one big risk assessment, and you have to kind of understand it's, for me, it's risk and reward, so is it, we all know how wonderful it feels to cycle, and we want to give that joy to our children, so we have to work through what is the safest way to do that. So we can provide, and we do provide sort of hints and tips to people. So, I would always say you never just put the shotgun seat or any seat on and just put your child in it and go. You practice getting them in and out first. You practice doing a ride without them. You practice the route you're going to go on, all that sort of stuff. And then you put them in and you go around around in a small circle and then take them off again, and you're terrified, and you build up in stages. You don't go, I'm going to go and cycle around the world, pop them in and go. And it's building up that confidence, which you have to do with everything, every single thing. I can remember being terrified carrying my baby down the stairs the first time, everything becomes this massive, I think, readjustment of how you see the world and how you see the threats to what is the most important thing in the world to you. And the problem we have, in a way, is I don't know what the road outside your house is like, so some people are perfectly happy to go and ride on it. You might live on a dual carriageway with no cycle path, and the advice would be, well, just don't do it, Pedro. You'd be ridiculous to do it. And that's the problem living in certain, parts of the world where we don't have that infrastructure.
Exactly.
We'd be having a very different conversation if you lived in the Netherlands, for example.
We probably wouldn't even be having this conversation.
No, we wouldn't be having the conversation, would we? So, and there's, and there are parts of the UK now, and in other countries where it is actually quite safe to cycle, and we'd be having a completely different conversation. So, a lot of it does come down to individual circumstances.
Yeah.
But what always makes me, people don't. Some of it is cultural as well. Nobody worries to the same extent of putting their kid in a car seat and driving them home from the hospital when they're like maybe even 24 hours old. It's just a thing that people do. And we're not culturally ingrained that, actually it's perfectly okay to do this. And it's a natural rite of passage that at this age you get your kid a bike seat and you take them out, or you put them in a trailer. So some of those perceptions are very much around what we see as acceptable and not acceptable to do with a child.
Yeah, I mean, culture is a big topic that we're trying to scratch the surface here, because culturally is, it's a rite of passage for parents to get their children to learn how to ride a bike. Not everyone can do it. You touched on the social barriers that exist. But for most parents, will be a rite of passage to get to their kids learning how to ride a bike. But then, there is the gap between learning how to ride a bike and then allowing them to go and ride their bikes by themselves. I mean, speaking from my experience, that was my experience. I've learned how to ride my bike, but then there was a massive gap where I didn't ride my bike, and I only started riding again when my parents bought me a bike when I was 11, I believe. So from learning how to ride a bike as in a little tricycle or even with stabilizers to then at 11, that's perhaps a whole time that is missed, that the child doesn't get the enjoyment of riding a bike. And riding a bike represents many things, but one of them is the freedom that it gives kids to go and explore by themselves. But then you don't have as a parent, if you don't have the trust, or if as external factors that you can't control, or it's very difficult to control, such as the infrastructure where you live, that will impact the decisions you make regarding the next steps. And this brings the question in my mind, as you've grown and become a kind of an authority in helping families, helping children riding their bikes. If you had unlimited resources, how would you innovate or kind of transform the space so that families can discover and enjoy cycling in a more widespread way?
If I had absolutely unlimited resources, so as much money as possible, well, then I would completely redesign our entire sort of landscapes, and I would do. I think the thing is, and it wasn't until I went to the Netherlands with my children on holiday and rode a bike with them that it actually twigged with me that it's not so much the infrastructure. Right. Per se, that we've got this really nice cycle route, or we've got whatever. It was the fact that I could get up in the morning and I could go from A to B, and it didn't matter where A and B were, but I knew I could get there without worrying that there was going to be a safety issue, because it just took away that level of fear and worry. And I just, it was just like, we're going to go here today and we're going to go on the bike. And you didn't have to think or worry in the slightest. And that was, and we've cycled in a few places around the world where they have reached that, that position. And it's always down to both, it's the infrastructure, but it's the attitude of other people as well. Yeah. And the design of the cityscape or the town or whatever it is, so that there's a respect for all the different users and everybody's moving around, because I mean, I ride a bike, but I also walk, I also drive, I also take public transport. So, I'm not a cyclist and nothing else, and sometimes I've got my kids with me, sometimes I haven't got my kids with me, sometimes I'm, going to work, sometimes it's, leisure. So it's setting up your entire transport system and your entire urban landscape to allow you to move around in the best appropriate way. And I think it's the Bike is Best campaign, where they've got this thing about the right tool for the job. And there are times when the cycling is the right tool for the job, and sometimes it's walking and sometimes it's going in a car, and it just feels as though we're not set up for that. And so I would change that, and I would just make it so that I can get from A to B in the best way, and everybody can do that. And then obviously it would be, universal access to all the equipment that people need, so that you don't have, if you need a cargo bike, you could have a cargo bike, and, and there'd be storage everywhere. It would be a utopia of cycling.
I mean, and yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, you have, the answers exist. The examples exist. It's just a question of how to apply them in the best way. I think. But also this kind of what you've just been talking is brings me to the business side, because starting this as a kind of to address a very personal pain point, and now growing it to a small team, but still it has a presence and an authority in children's cycling. How do you go about to manage the kind of that growth? You mentioned you needed to make it to bring revenue from it if you were going to decrease your hours in your other work, which was there as a full-time parent working a full-time job. So what talk me through the transition, because that's for many people like myself, for people that have started their own projects, whether they have fashion projects, whether they're starting a business, they will go through the same kind of experience of having to grow and the pains of growth, if you will. What was your experience?
Yeah, so I worked, a bit of context, I work as a project manager, sort of in the insurance finance side of things. And I went freelance when I became a parent, for various reasons. So I was working on a project, and then, and I would work. And I say I worked full time, I was actually only working a maximum of 4 days a week, although sometimes I worked sort of compressed hours. So I was working a lot. But I always had that little bit of spare time. But hardly any spare time. I was a parent as well. I was trying to get out there and do all this. So how I did it, I look back now and I'm like, when did I actually do anything? Maybe I didn't sleep. I'm not sure. Can't remember. But anyway, it's all a bit of a blur. But it became... It almost, you get to a point, and I think this has happened at each time, where you just get to this limit. So it's like, well, I can write a blog a week, or I can write a blog a fortnight, or a blog a month, or whatever. But then I haven't got any time to do social media, I haven't got any time to do this. And it may have just stayed as a blog and then almost maybe petered out, because I see a lot of people do this. They start to become an influencer or write a blog, and then, the world takes over. But I think it was just this perfect storm, really, of some products brands started to launch, some products came along, they got in touch with me, they would say, can you review this stuff? But then affiliate marketing became a thing. So it was like, right, okay, well, we can actually monetize this a little bit. If, we write a review and then people click on the link, we will get a little bit of income from this. So there became a bit of a way of monetizing it. And then, the internet continued to grow, and then there was like, we could put ads on the website and make a little bit of income from that. So I could start to prove that there was a business model behind it, because you've got to have a business model to make it work. And I think it was just the perfect time that I was at the front of that wave almost. And the tech, if I'd been 5 years before, the tech wouldn't have existed for me to monetize in the way that I was able to. So I think some of it was circumstance. And then, I think the other thing was I just wanted to do something and prove that I could do it and build it from scratch. And I don't know, I'm just I just had that entrepreneurial spirit. I'd already gone freelancing and was running my own sort of little business doing project management. So I'd got that sort of, I like being my own boss. And then it was almost like, can I build something from scratch that's got some sort of value? At the time, so we're talking, it was about 13 and a half years ago when I actually set it up. And I wanted to protect myself and my family, that I couldn't be, sued by somebody or, something untoward. So I just took a little bit of advice and I set up as a limited company. Some people might have set up as a CIC now because they now exist, might have set up as a charity, but at the time I just did what I was available to me, which then forced me down this route of, I've set myself up as a limited company, so you probably ought to make a bit of money to keep going. So it sort of grew from there. And so once I proved there was a little bit of a business model, I then hit the first barrier, which is what we've talked about before, the time. I just couldn't physically go any further. So then I think you're on this entrepreneurial journey, which is the same for anybody setting up a business in any area whatsoever, is you just can't do everything. You have to bring in some form of external help. So it starts off with, I obviously had some IT. I had some IT support and help to build the website, and so I had that. Then I'd need an accountant. Then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I need some administrative help. So I got a VA to come in and help me, and we still work together. Penny, she's amazing, and she does all my sort of admin and invoicing when we get to that point. So basically, I learnt to outsource everything that wasn't core to the business. So I wasn't worrying, if I'm doing a piece of paid work for a client, I don't need to be doing the invoicing. Penny can do that. I need to be doing the review or whatever. Exactly. So we managed like that for quite a few years, to be honest.
And because is this still while you're doing your freelance work on the side as well?
Yeah. But what happened, Pedro, was two things. One, I would go and the type of project I was doing was all in. So when you're doing it, you work flat out. At one point I had to go and work overseas, and I just literally didn't do anything on Cycle Sprog for 9 months because I was working overseas. But I was building up something that once it's there, once I've written something, people can keep finding it.
Exactly.
So
it lives on it.
Yeah, it is there. So I'd go away. I'd do like 9 months a year's project, and then the nature of the work means that you then have a lull. You've worked yourself into the ground. You then take some time off. So then I would work on Cycle Sprog for 6 months, 9 months. So it was boom and bust really with both things.
I mean, it's probably not very conducive. It's not very good. Conducive. I was trying to. I don't know if it's conducive, but it shows that kind of balance is not real. It's just you have to prioritize.
You have to
different
prioritize
things at different times.
Yeah, and I need to prioritize paying my mortgage, and feeding my kids and all that sort of stuff. My husband doesn't work or didn't work. He was a full-time stay-at-home dad, which allowed me to go away and work the stupidly long hours and go and travel and everything that I needed to do in my role. So it was down to me to bring in the income. So it was a big decision when I would be like, right, I'm not actively looking for another project. I am going to earn. We don't spend much, we just like riding our bikes, save some money, then work on Cycle Sprog until the money runs out, then go back. It's a very different lifestyle. We could have lived a much more luxurious lifestyle if we'd said, I'm just going to work all the time. And then I managed to so I take these blocks, and then it got to the point where, well, I'm bringing in, we're starting to build this as a business now. So then I would be like, right, I can only work 3 days a week. So I was really strict. So I'd be like, right, if you want me to come and run your project, I will work 3 days a week for you. I won't go into the project management side, but actually, if you're a good project manager, you can probably manage a big project or a big program in 3 days. People need 2 days to get on with the work. So, that worked. So I was sort of working 5 days a week, but three on my project and program management, and 2 on Cycle Sprog, and it just kind of developed from there. So I was I was still the linchpin. I was still doing all the doing along with my husband. My husband would help with the views and the photography, and he's much more technical than me. So we'd kind of run it, it just worked until COVID. And then that was the real big eye opener for me, because I got ill. Well, we've all got ill, our entire family. We were early adopters of COVID. So when everybody else was out buying toilet rolls, we were ill in bed. And then we just didn't get better, and we got long COVID.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So suddenly it was like, I can't do stuff, and I did, and I carried on, and I, did bits and bobs, but I just was not functioning at the rate I should have been functioning at. Mm-hmm. And it just made me realise that if Cycle Sprog is going to be a long-lasting legacy, it can't just be me. I need to be able to not be there, and it needs to operate. So that made me realise that I need to scale the team. I need to get a team to come in. I need to systemise everything. So I spent a year literally documenting everything I did in a year. So the rhythm of the business, everything I did, creating processes, so that then I could bring in people to start to do the work for me. And then also it meant I could scale, because it means, I've got 3 people who work for me now, all on various part-time hours, but it means now we've got a family review panel of loads of people, and we can have bikes and equipment coming and going all the time, because there's somebody, Emily looks after that side of the business, but it's a big piece of work. I couldn't do that and also do something else, so Mildred looks after all our buyer's guides, so she's keeping those up to date, and then Saskia is our cargo bike expert, and she came in and wrote all our cargo bike content, because I couldn't do that. I don't have the knowledge. So it's like, right, if we want to scale and become, keep being relevant, because cargo bikes have become a thing, I need to have a cargo bike expert. So, I've been on that sort of entrepreneurial journey of kind of, if I want to scale the business, I have to scale a team.
It's interesting that kind of, to see the kind of pulling the curtain behind, the process, because it's, these things, growing a business is, you can have mentors, you can have templates that you can follow, but it's still very personal. And in your case, it's a kind of a founder-led business. You as you said, you kind of took you a year to document all the processes, so that people then that come into the business as part-time employees then can take that part away, that responsibility away from you, and kind of do that, focus on doing the best with following those procedures. And I'm kind of just wanting to touch on that in particular point. As you grow the business, this is something that happens to a lot of businesses that are founder led, is that you have to communicate, you have to share that passion that you had starting the business to the people that are now coming to work for you. And that comes as a challenge with that, because the people that come to work with you might have similar passion, but they didn't perhaps experience the same kind of the light bulb moment, the process of going through the motions to get each piece of content written, created, and the website, and so forth. It just grows and grows and grows. So it comes to a point where you have to kind of delegate that responsibility and try to communicate as best as you can to those people, to your team. These are the journey we are on. This is the passion. This is the ambition we have, so that they can also try and do this kind of the same work you did, but in their own way. So what I'm trying to get at is, how do you communicate that ambition, that vision that you as a founder have, but they come as outsiders to the business?
It's really hard. It really is difficult. I think there's 2 things there. There's one, and it's all intertwined, I think. One is you have to be able to articulate that vision, and you have to have a founder story. So I've got my story of how I've developed Cycle Sprog, and that is never going to go away. Yeah, and that's just part of the DNA of Cycle Sprog as to how we founded it. But then I think maybe what I found very difficult to begin with was stepping into that leadership role and articulating the vision, and then mentoring and providing the direction and letting other people get on with it, because it had been my baby. It was, I'd written at one point, I'd written virtually everything. My husband had written a few articles, but I had written virtually everything on the website, and I had certainly read every single word on the website. Yeah. So to suddenly be in a position where it's like, well, there's now 3 people and they're creating all this content and they're writing it, and somebody else is proofreading it, and then it's going live and I haven't looked at it, and I maybe might not see it for a week or 2 if I'm off working somewhere else. That was such a mind shift for me to be able to let go of that. So that whole process of delegating, stepping back, changing my focus and stuff, I would do it very differently if I was doing it again.
Yeah.
And I think we've as a team, we've had to kind of work it through, and what can I and a lot of it's trust, but then a lot of it, you can't trust someone to do something if you've not explained it to them properly, or they don't have the skill set. So it's kind of, that is something, and I'm still working on my leadership style, and I'm having coaching, and I'm working through, there's a whole load of stuff that I have to work on in order to bring the business forward. But then the other thing I'm really lucky about is all 3 of my, employees, so actually all 4 of us, because if you include me, there's 4 people who work on the business all the time. We're all Cycling UK, 100 Women in Cycling. We've all got a passion for getting, people on bikes and for cycling. So it's not like I've just pluck somebody who isn't a cyclist. We've all got that inner passion.
Yeah, that's important.
So that hasn't been a problem for me. But yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, and it's a journey. And yeah, what you're supposed to do, but implementing it is really hard. Or sometimes you don't know what you need to do. And it's interesting, I think, as well, Pedro, because you said, you're a founder-led business, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm a kind of an accidental entrepreneur, and I didn't know, I didn't even know what my options were. I started this blog, and then it started to make a little bit of money, and I've just grown it and stuff. And then suddenly it's like, oh yes, I'm a founder-led business, because I haven't brought in any external, I don't have any other shareholders. I don't, I haven't taken on, angel investment and all this sort of stuff, but mostly because I didn't know I could do it. It never occurred to me. Right. I've just been doing, I'm a busy, I've got a busy job, I'm a mum, I've got, all this sort of stuff. You just kind of just do things, and then you wake up 10 years later and go, oh.
I'm here.
I don't know, I'm a founder-led business. Isn't that great?
But credit to you, obviously, because that you have been on this journey and you have taken the necessary steps to bring it to where it is. And now we are having this conversation. But I also wanted to explore a little bit of the kind of, well, if you will, the kind of the I guess the darker side of this is that something that is not so often shared. As a parent, working as a freelancer, having Cycle Sprog as well, what is from your experience, what has been the balance in kind of multitasking all of this? Has there been a point ever where you felt, this is not sustainable, something needs to change?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been certain points at that. So I had I'd set up Cycle Sprog. I think we've been going for about 2 years. So it's still very much in the blog space. We hadn't started to really monetize it. And then I got an opportunity. It was the project of my career. I got a phone call on the Thursday saying, we desperately need you to go to Dublin. Are you in on this? There's a really big thing that's just happened in the company. We need to crack team to go on Monday morning to Dublin, and it's going to be flat out. It was a broad issue. It was a really, really big thing that could have brought the company down. And it was like, you've got to make a decision. Are you in or out? And I was like, I'm in. Yeah, I'm going. And I just couldn't do Cycle Sprog. And I just put it on hold for 9 months. I don't think I even logged into it for 9 months. I was just like, I am working and I'm a mum. and a wife and a daughter and a whatever. And that was my life in 9 months. And I think that was one of those turning points for me, though, and this is how I've been able to prove the business model, is I stepped away for those 9 months. I think I maybe logged into the Facebook account twice in 9 months and sent a message or something to reply to somebody. And then at the end of the 9 months, it was like, whoa, that was intense. And then I looked at my Google Analytics and I was like, oh, look, the numbers have gone up. People have been finding me. I logged onto the email and people have been sending me emails, and I literally didn't do anything on it. And then it's like, right, okay, this is obviously proving that there's a need for this. People are loving it. People are wanting it. And I've had to do that on numerous occasions, almost for personal reasons, health reasons, work reasons. You sort of step away from it, but the core of Cycle Sprog is still there. The articles are still there. The advice is still there. The guides, the downloads, everything is still there for people. So it just means it might get a bit out of date. It means I'm not creating new content, but I've done it in those sort of incremental steps. And sometimes I do get overwhelmed, and I have got to the point where it's just like, I can't do this anymore. What am I going to do with Cycle Sprog? Am I going to close it down even? What am I going to do? And then that's when I usually then go and look at, right, okay, where am I on the entrepreneurial journey? It's all well documented. Oh, I've reached this point. Okay, I need to go and get a VA, or, I need to go and bring in a team member, or I need to do, and there's, once you get into that kind of, I think that was one of the best things that happened to me, was when I discovered that, companies do businesses do follow a transition, sort of a journey, as it were, transition from one phase to another. And there's key things you have to do if you're going to allow the business to thrive. And now I'm a bit better at going, okay, right, I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to shut it down. I'm going to go, right, what do I need to do now to make sure we're sustainable and we move to the next level? But it took me years to realise that I was even on this path, and that I was even an entrepreneur, and I was even running a small business. It was just something I did, And
because you started with the young children, your 2 young children, and then as they grow, you also need new equipment to get them to keep going, and then it has a life of its own, because you also need to provide the infrastructure, or not infrastructure, sorry, my mistake, the resources and equipment to your kid, and then like that. But it's such an interesting and individual story, because as your kids progress and grow, you also had to adapt, and just by providing the necessary equipment for them, and that got you on that journey, and kind of things. People also recognize that the work you're doing was great, provided insightful resources to them, and it kind of started more people, so you lose trust over time.
It was a very, very time-consuming way of making sure I didn't ever have to pay for a new piece of equipment for my kids. It was putting it a lot easier and a lot cheaper and a lot less stress to just go out and buy the bikes. But it did mean that there was a period. I mean, my kids got into mountain biking. My boys got into mountain biking, and we moved up to Cumbria, where we now live. And it meant that they were just riding like top-end mountain bikes. And I think there was one point where my son had test-ridden every single 24-inch wheel mountain bike available in the UK. We just had this stream of really great bikes coming through and stuff. So it had its plus points, but yes, and I think that's, they did mountain biking, but it meant that, I've got 2 boys. So if I wanted any content with girls, if I wanted any content that wasn't mountain biking, I had to sort of actually scale as well and go,
and that's something
I need other people.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to touch on that, because now with the rise of cargo bikes, as you mentioned, you mentioned getting a specialist on the team to review and talk about also e-bikes and cargo e-bikes. And this is an important sector to get more people into cycling, more children, but also, more importantly, parents, so that children can see their parents as well, taking up the sport or just a bike, so that they can move A to B, or for as a hobby. And I wanted to have your take, because you have seen the industry as well grow, and you have seen the rise of cargo bikes. How is the cargo bikes, e-bikes in general, in your perspective, reshaping kind of family cycling?
Oh, I think they're just making it so much more accessible. I mean, I can remember when we lived in Chester in the early days, so it's nowhere near as hilly as where we live here in Cumbria, but there was a slight incline up to the school, which I thought was a hill until I moved here, but I thought it was a hill up to the school. And I mean, it was flipping hard work, once I had two and we were pulling them in the trailer and stuff, and it was a physical workout every day to get them to the school. And then it got to the point where it's like, I just physically, and I'm fit, fit and healthy. And it's got to the point where it's like, I cannot pull them anymore. We're going to have to look at another solution because, we need to get them onto a tag along and a rear seat. And then it almost forces you as well. So then it got to the point where it's like, right, we now need you on a bike, the oldest one on a bike on the road, because the youngest one no longer fits in the front seat. So we need to put him on the tag along. So it was kind of like the equipment was dictating almost how we rode, and the safety aspect as well. Ideally, I wouldn't have had my kid riding on the road at 5, but I needed him to because of the equipment. And now I would just have got a cargo bike, an electric cargo bike, and they'd have both been sitting on the back of the bike. And I can remember the first cargo bike we got sent to review was probably 4 years ago, something like that. So. And my youngest then would have been like 12, 13. And I can remember I just came up one of the really steep hills in Cumbria with him on the back as a sort of a 12-year-old. And I wasn't even breathing hard. And I was just like, wow. Oh, this is amazing.
This is it.
The youth of today don't know what we used to have to do, I wouldn't have probably been as fit, but, it's just a game changer, it means you can carry multiple children. It adapts with you. It's such a important development, I think, in getting family cycling. And it means you don't have to be fit. And keep getting fitter and fitter and fitter. And I just got to the point where it's like, right, I physically can't do this anymore. It's just impossible for me to haul them. If you've got an e-bike, you're never going to get to that point. Exactly. So I think that transport is really, really good. I think you mentioned leisure as well. I, at the moment, have resisted having an e-bike, but I can't ride. No, I can no longer ride with my kids from a kind of, my eldest. I mean, he is 19 and he rides really, really, really fast on his road bike and stupidly long distances. So I could get an e-bike, but I don't think he rides at an average of more than an e-bike is possible to go at. So we agree that if we do ever do anything, we kind of meet for a coffee or something like that, and he goes off. But he's a bit of an extreme. But there was a time which I think, had we not had COVID and had I not been ill, I may have moved to E, because we would have carried on riding together at that point, because it just means you can keep up with them, because they're suddenly, you're suddenly old and irrelevant, and they're young and vibrant and getting fitter by the hour, and it becomes quite difficult. So and I can see just the number of people, especially here in Cumbria, it's really, really hilly. And so many people now have got E because they can carry on riding. And you can carry on riding. Your fitness does naturally decline as you get older. But if you want to keep riding, you want to, keep bringing the shopping up the hill, that sort of thing by bike. It's incredible. And it's also opening it up to people who would before never have been able to cycle around here because it was just too steep. They can now do it. So it's revolutionary.
For sure. I mean, that's something. I mean, anyone that is paying attention to the cargo bikes, e-bikes, can see that change, and how it opens the new doors to people that wouldn't see cycling on or riding bikes to work as a possibility. Now the e-bikes that is transformed. And I wanted to touch on a particular topic, because I'm sure you get hundreds of stories. I mentioned earlier on in the conversation that, correct me if I'm wrong, that you share success stories on your social media on Cycle Sprog about families that have successfully used products you have recommended. And this is kind of, as a business, seeing those stories of parents reading the work you do, and then buying the products and having this joy of riding with their kids, that brings a massive amount of pride and joy as well to you and to your team. Probably this is quite a big ask, but has there been a story that over these years that you're running Cycle Sprog that kind of has been deeply moving to you?
I think it's hard because there's so many, and it's really hard because sometimes I hear stories of people, and it's like, is it one individual? So, for example, there's people who have sort of trailblazed and just shown what's possible. So, somebody that sort of springs to mind is someone like Cece Balfour, who is a disabled young lady. She's a young woman now, but she's really come through, and she's been with her mum Vicky. She's been in magazines, she's been in films. She's now a ride leader in the New Forest Off-Road Club, and she's just done so much to show that for people who are not as physically able can still get out there and can still enjoy. So somebody like that is like truly inspirational, and you can see what it's done for her life and what she's done. But she's like one person out of many, I do, we work with various other organisations who are on the ground, because what we do is we provide knowledge online to people and advice, but you need that bit in between. So we work with on the ground organisations. So someone like Catherine Corrie, who is involved in Women on Wheels in Glasgow and who runs the Shortlands Bike Bus, we've run some sessions for them online, and then she's provided some on the ground training for people. And then when I hear back from her, like the difference that's had to families, especially sort of in inner city Glasgow, who are often at the forefront of those social barriers and those cultural barriers that we talk about. And then she tells me what's happened. And then I see on social that there's this group of families and they've gone out and they've done this thing. And, that's just like, whoa, that's life-changing. It's life-changing for them. But then I just get the emails, and somebody's just saying, oh, thank you so much, Karen. One of the reasons we run Cycle Sprog is because there's so many rubbish kids bikes out there, and people buy a really rubbish heavy kids bike, which is like a toy. It's not a bike, it's a toy. And I was having this a lot with my friends. They would say to me, oh, Karen, it's all right, your boys love cycling. My child hates cycling. I bought them a bike, I paid this for it, and then they hated it, they've never ridden it, and I'm never buying them another bike. And for me, that's like, And I used to spend a lot of time talking to them, going, well, what's wrong with them? Where are you taking them? What are you doing? And then I'd say, and then they'd say something about, the Thomas the Tank Engine bike or the Princess bike or whatever. And I go, just a minute, let's rewind. Okay, yeah, that's why they're not enjoying it. And then now it's the first question I ask. I go, what bike did you buy them? And nobody tells me that this conversation never happens with someone who's bought a really decent bike for their kid, that they hate riding it from, a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. It changes when they get to the teenage years and stuff. But, if you give a young child a decent bike, they're going to love riding it, So the mission with Cycle Sprog has been to make sure that parents and grandparents are buying those decent bikes so that the kid will love them, and then they'll see that the child is loving them, they'll see its value for money, and then they'll buy the next one, and then and then we've got the next generation of cyclists coming through. So when I get those emails from somebody who says, I found Cycle Sprog, my kid was hating riding their bike, I realised I bought them the really rubbish toy bike, I've invested maybe even in a second-hand bike, that was cheaper than the toy bike that they bought, and the difference now is unbelievable. I can't get them off it, they want to cycle all the time, that every single, I never get fed up with that, and they've been coming through for best part of 13 years now, and every time I get one of those, it just makes my heart go, yes, this is why we're doing this. That kid now is going to love cycling and is going to hopefully be like us in however many years' time, and then teaching their kid. And so that for me is every single one of those, I think, is a as a success story for that particular child and that particular family.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's if that kind of impact, it's priceless. It's you're changing a family life, you're changing the outlook of a child on the getting on their bikes. It's that that kind of impact it's what a lot of people strive to, but it's hard to get to. It's you're changing. It can sound a bit corny, but you're actually changing a family's life. You're changing the enjoyment that they get of riding and opening up new doors to whether it is cargo e-bikes. Getting them and opening their eyes to the possibilities that exist right there, rather than being stuck in. If you don't see it, you can't do it, or if you can't have the resources, but everything is there for you to access. You just need to look for it. And as well, the success story, and that's and that's really links to what I want to ask next, which is a question I ask all of my guests. And what does success looks like to you?
Yeah, for me, success with Cycle Sprog is actually getting it so it no longer needs me, and I can step away. Not completely, but it's if I went under the proverbial bus, Cycle Sprog's not going to collapse, and it will still be there, and it will still continue to be a useful resource. So for me, that's making it financially viable without me having to go and do my project management work. We're not quite there yet. That there's a team in place that can do all aspects of the business, so they're not relying on me. And that I've got this kind of vision of all the other things I want to do, and that we're doing all of those as well. It's slow. Business is hard, so I want to get it to that point where it's reached its potential, and there's so much more we could be doing. And you've touched on some of these things, and as we've been talking, I've been going, we need to do that. So I wanted to reach that potential where it's the one-stop place, and we can answer everybody's questions, and we can
also, you mentioned about Cycle Sprog, and that's kind of that's the legacy you want to leave with the work you're doing in Cycle Sprog. And I'm also interested for you personally, what does success look like?
I think, that's a really tough for me personally. Being content, I think. Being content with my lot. So not for example, I did the Rafa 100 ride on Sunday. So I went out, rode 100 kilometres, and then, being like,
the women's ride.
Yeah, the women's ride, yeah. And it's like, right, okay, I did that. I got up on a Sunday morning and I went and rode 100k. I should be really pleased. I was the slowest person in the group, and I had to leave an hour earlier than everybody else because they were all young and fit. But it's like, no, I'm happy. I did that. I'm not comparing. So being content with where you are on your journey.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is what real success is. And also having 2 children who still want to speak to me and be with me. That's a real measure of success as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it. It's that kind of being content with yourself. It's got from my experience, it involves quite a few pieces. Being grateful, being kind to yourself, being ambitious as well, but also being proud of what you have achieved so far. So there's several pieces that need to fit together. I think for me, being content, that's what it means. But maybe for you it's different. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's my analysis of what it is, because it can be quite complex.
Yes, it's complex, and I think I'm a type A personality where it's like I do something, and then you're just like, right, what's next, and I've got to grow, and I've got to do more, and sometimes you do have to take stock and go, do you know what? And this is a useful exercise for me to go, do you know what, we have done all of this, and we are helping all these people, and I shouldn't be beating myself up because we're not doing more. Yes, we will get there and we will do more, but actually we have come such a long way.
Yeah.
that reflection. And I'm learning to do that. I'm learning to take stock and go, yeah, just a minute. This is good, what we've done, and appreciate where we are.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with age, it's like, right, okay, we're just going through a real life milestone with my son about to go to university at the weekend, and the other one finishing school and starting A-levels. And it's kind of like, it's a changing of a season. And it's like, you look back and you go, okay, yeah, we've done all right. They're still talking to us. They still want to spend time with us. So,
yeah, I mean, I will get to that stage, hopefully. But yeah, it's kind of, there's a real merit to having a family that, one just speaks to each other. Not everyone can say that, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is, and it's interesting because that it is difficult, how do you bond with your children and what do you do? And for me, cycling has been that thing that for many, many years was almost a glue that we had this common bond, and we went on, our holidays were based around cycling, our weekends were based around cycling, we cycled to school, and it was just a thing. And especially as a mother with boys, I can't go and play rugby with them. I can't go and, do all these other things. I've tried, but yeah. Whereas the cycling, I was really, really keen that I would cycle. I wasn't going to be a mum who stayed at home while dad and the boys went off cycling. We did everything together, and I developed all my mountain biking skills and all this sort of stuff as I was, developing with them. And it's just given us so many memories now to look back on. That the bike is just part of the story. It's all the other things that we did, all the places we went, all the experiences. And, you can't take that away, I think. And I think if you can find that glue, for us, it was biking, for somebody else, it might be something else completely. But if you've got that common interest, it helps you, through some of those difficult times.
For sure. Yeah. I think that having, it's, I would think that is quite difficult to have a nuclear family that shares the same interest and can bond over it. I don't know. I'm not. I can only speak from my experience. It's very difficult, but
it's very difficult. Yeah. And but the other thing as well, which is really really common, is your kids will do it while you're forcing them to do it. Almost, they've got no choice in it. Your 1-year-old son is not gonna have any choice in it. But then there is that rebel moment where it doesn't matter how much they love it, but because you as the parent love it, they're going to go, I don't want to do it, and they're going to play up, and and you just have to ride with that, ride through it. Literally, whatever that is. And if they decide, we had one guy who was part of our community who was massively into it, and then his daughters decided they wanted to go into horses, and he was just like, what do I do? I'm spending all my weekends at the stables, because they want to do horses, they don't want to do bikes, but they may come back to it in the future or whatever. So you have to be, and my youngest went into rugby, and he went through the whole, I'm not riding a bike, he was into team sports and all that sort of stuff. And my oldest threw himself into it, rides stupid distances now, stupidly fast, competes, has done coaching, everything. His life revolves around cycling. And the other one barely goes on a bike, but when he does, he's very good. He seems to enjoy it, and I hope that when he's got out of the teenage kind of, I don't want to do this because mum likes me to do it, he might.
It's as a parent, you can, you can only do your best, and there's no point in forcing something that they don't want to do, because you'll just create more pain, unnecessary pain. It's a kind of I don't know. From my limited experience, compared to you, I see it as trying to guide them into the right decisions and let them make the ultimate choice. I'm still very green in this.
Yeah. And somebody, I am as well. It's always a journey. And somebody whose kids are older than mine said, just keep going. So if they're going through the teenage years and they want to sit in their room and be really stroppy, still go on the bike ride, still go and get the ice cream at the end, and then come back and tell them, oh, it was really good, and we did this and this, and we had the ice cream. And then the next time they may come with you because they'll be like, oh, they may or they may not, but you just have to work out what your techniques are going to be, and cycling, I tell you what, cycling is the least of the worries.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, these were brilliant. I wanted to now kind of bring it to a close, by following a tradition that I started on the podcast, where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. And the question that was left for you is the following. Do you think in your life there will be a point when you give up your car and use a bike for transport solely?
Oh, right. Okay. Would I give up my car? I hardly drive. I have got a car and I do drive, but that is mainly the main reason I have a car is because my parents don't live locally, and there's occasions where I have to get to them very, very quickly. And it's 40 minutes by car and it's 2.5 hours by public transport, and it might be in the middle of the night. So I have to have a car for that reason. I live in a small town, and I went 3 years I didn't drive. So yeah, I don't think, whilst I still live where I am, whilst my parents are still with us, then no, I wouldn't give up my car for that reason. But I try not to cycle. I try not to drive.
Yeah.
So, I would love, that would be my aspiration, to live somewhere and be able to not ever have a car. Or I'm also seriously thinking about the car clubs. So
sharing club. Yeah.
So I could, I could have a car club membership and then just use it when I need to and stuff. So yeah, I'm married to a guy who likes cars. So that's kind of like, it's a difficult one. But myself, yeah, I can function very well without a car.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a question. Sorry, it's an answer that will changes. Because at different stages in people's lives, that they might think they have in mind the more responsibilities, less responsibilities. So that it changes, and also the where you live. That kind of dictates, especially in the UK, dictates what you can do with just a bike as a means of transport.
Yeah, I lived in London for a number of years when I was younger, and I think I was there for about 5 years. I didn't have a car at all then, and used public transport, cycled, and the odd occasion where I needed a car, we would rent one. But so yeah, that's my aspiration.
Very good. So I guess now is your turn to leave a question to my next guest. What would you like to ask them?
Yeah, so I'm obviously with 2 teenagers. I'm going through the whole teenage angst and the So my question would be, what would you tell your teenage version of yourself around why you should keep cycling, and what cycling is going to bring you
Very good.
as you go through life's journey?
Very good. As if I've kind of going back in time, or it's like what piece of advice would you give them? That's a brilliant question. I'm sure there will be an interesting reply to that. And also, it's for the people listening, it kind of provides them an interesting point of conversation for people, because it's I only started cycling and taking cycling as a hobby. Through my teenagers years, I enjoyed cycling, and I did it as a means to get me from A to B, give myself a little bit of freedom to go train. So that but I didn't see it as some almost as I almost only saw it as a means of transport rather than as a way to go and ride kind of trails. That's an interesting question for me.
And it brought you to be talking to me today on your podcast. We would, cycling for me, it's been everything. It's been my transport, my sport, my activity, my family bonding, my friends, my business now. It's and a bit like you, I didn't cycle. I learned to ride when I was very, very little, and then I think I was 14 when I got my next bike. So I did the rite of passage, learned to pedal, and I was 14. I absolutely loved the freedom it gave me, but I never realised where it would take me.
Very good. Yeah. There you go. I mean, it's life is not a straight line. It takes you in some can be a very twisted road. It takes some turns. Karen, it's been a huge pleasure to have these moments, to have this conversation with you, because I feel like through having this conversation that I kind of revealed something more personal from you, from your experience, and kind of what it means to you, with Cycle Sprog, but also the challenges that came with it. And that's the beauty of these conversations. It just kind of takes time and allows people to just talk through at length about their experience and really kind of reflect almost, what it means for them. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been great. And I'm so excited to see where your family cycling journey goes, because you're right at the beginning. I'm very jealous.
Yes.
You've got all those memories. You've got all those memories to come. So,
that is
it's really
true.
exciting for you. Yeah. Thanks ever so much, Pedro.
Thank you. Karen has shown us that family cycling is about confidence, culture, and creating joyful memories on two wheels. Now, here's what I would love you to do. If this conversation sparked ideas how cycling can shape your own family life, your work, or even your mindset, please share it with two friends who might find it just as inspiring. And don't forget to follow Ride to Success wherever you listen to the podcast so you never miss the stories and the strategies shaping cycling. Think of this as an invitation to keep exploring with me. Each episode is a chance to step behind the curtain of the cycling world, the industry, the people leading it, and meet the people who are innovating, building, and dreaming big. So as you head back into your day, I invite you to imagine what's one small step you could take to make cycling more a part of your life or your community's life this week. Thank you for listening to the episode, and I'll see you on the next episode of Ride to Success, where we continue to learn, get inspired, and pedal toward a more productive, creative, and active future through the power of the bike. Thank you.